Remote tropical islands, amazing caves, climbing over collapses, and magical cyan blue sinkholes. Those are the stakes of today's episode of the Dive Saga Dive Debrief podcast as we debrief the first half of our Caves of Sulawesi series. This is the Dive Saga Dive Debrief podcast, and I'm your host, underwater filmmaker and scuba instructor trainer Nick de Rooter. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Dive Saga Dive Debrief podcast, the listening companion to the viewing experience that is, of course, the Dive Saga YouTube channel. If you are not yet subscribed to the channel, then you are doing this the other way around. Definitely go and do that. If you are already subscribed, then welcome to the podcast, where the goal is to debrief, as the name suggests, the dives that we have done on the channel. I first want to give a little shout out to our sponsor of this episode, which is In Depth magazine. In Depth isn't about gear hype or clickbait, it's about real dive stories, real explorers, and real underwater science. And if you enjoy the Dive Saga channel and this podcast, then you'll probably love the kind of long-form articles and photography that they publish. You can find In Depth magazine online or in print, and by supporting them, you're helping keep serious dive journalism alive. So surf to www.indepthmag.com and start reading and learning for free today. So let's unpack this Caves of Sulawesi series, and before we get started, maybe I should really thank everybody for tuning in so numerously. This is the most successful production so far on the Dive Saga channel. We were off to a bit of a mediocre start with relatively average viewing numbers, and now that we're 4 episodes in, for some reason the 4th episode really exploded. Has been viewed around 35,000 times in the first 5 days, mostly by Indonesian viewers, which is of course amazing. A lot of proud Indonesian people seeing their country on the Dive Saga channel and being happy and supportive about that. So that's great. Thank you very much, boys and girls. And there are 3 more episodes to come, so let's see where that can take this series. In episode 1, we dove under the city of Baubau. Super amazing dive site. As you know, I like dive sites where the entrance is a little bit dramatic. As I always say, the more interesting the entrance to the dive site, the more interesting the dive. In this case, the cave runs underneath the city of Baubau. So it's a city of 135,000 people. So it's not a small city by my standards anyway, being from Belgium. And the fact that the cave entrance, I expected it still to be somewhat out of the city, and maybe theoretically running under the city perimeter. But it's literally in the city, in some side street, in someone's backyard, behind a gate, freely accessible as well. And then just take some steps down and start your dive. Simple as that. The only place that there really is to change into your equipment as well is the parking lot of this mosque, right? So you just pull up next to the mosque and start kitting up, which is in itself a little bit of a weird experience. It's right by the ocean. It's next to this mosque. It's across a busy street. It's just a really weird setting for then an actual proper cave dive. But all of that was organized by Sulawesi Dive Trek and specifically by Robin Cuesta. So I do want to give them a bit of a shout out here for organizing this actually on fairly short notice. I think we had about a month to put it all together. And Robin Cuesta then contacted Chacha, who was my Indonesian dive guide. He's a cave diver and a really good one as well. And he, of course, was briefed beforehand that this would be a video shoot, and he went above and beyond to make that happen. So that's absolutely amazing. Whenever people cooperate like that, they are equally as instrumental to growing the Dive Saga channel as myself. Lanto Cave, as it's called, the cave under Baubau, is, I think from what I understand, usually used as sort of a shakedown dive. So it is absolutely an overhead dive. So it is certainly a cave. There's not really a whole lot of cavern area, but it is a good first try and get your gear sorted, especially because Baubau, as I said, is still a decent sized city. That's also where Sulawesi Dive Trek is located. So if there are any gear issues, if let's say you need extra weight, whatever, they have their home base there. They can go do the dive, drive 15 minutes, fix whatever needs to be fixed. So it's a really good spot for a shakedown dive. And while it is a beautiful cave and has some cenote-like features, lots of decorations, stalactites, it's not the best cave of them all, which says something about the rest of the caves that are to be seen there in Southeast Sulawesi. So it's actually really nice that they have this in Baubau. You know, it's like sort of a shakedown dive site. Very easy cave to dive, fairly easy to navigate, fairly large open spaces, so no restrictions, and I think maybe one circuit, so like one navigational complexity, if you will, but nothing really out of the ordinary. Which kind of brings me to where all of this is located, because a lot of people have asked how to even get there in the first place. And indeed, how do you get to Baubau? It took me a bit of time to figure it out as well, because if you go to your flight search engine, you typically don't find it either, even though they have an airport, but it's a local airport. So the best way I found is to fly into Makassar, which is a city also in Sulawesi. I'm pretty sure you can probably fly into Jakarta, which is the capital of Indonesia, make your way to Makassar, and then you have to book a local flight to Baubau. Super inexpensive for me anyway. I think for Indonesians probably still pricey, but doable if you're already coming from abroad, if you're already investing in those flights. The extra flight is very doable, and they are very generous with their oversized luggage fees, which I thought was very convenient considering the amount of equipment that I was hauling around. If you decide to dive there, again, I would consider contacting Sulawesi Dive Trek. You can simply Google them. They're very good at giving you all the information you need, but it is a little bit of an adventure because it is an area of Indonesia that is visited a little bit less. To state it crudely, for the whole 10 days that I was there, I did not see another foreigner, like not a single one. And maybe simply because I wasn't paying enough attention, but even in Baubau, which is a large city, I'm sure there are other visitors, but I didn't see anybody. So that's, and it's rare to still come in places on the planet where that's the case, but everybody is super welcoming. As you can see in the comments under a lot of episodes, Indonesians are very proud people, and very welcoming and very eager to share the stunning natural beauty that their country has to offer. After spending some time in Baubau and doing the one Lanto Cave dive, we headed to Muna Island. So Muna is then a neighboring island, and that is actually where the majority of the cave diving action happens. That in itself is also just a really nice experience. We did a ferry crossing to get to Muna because we, of course, had the truck with all of the equipment. So it's a little bit of an expedition. We had to pack everything that we knew or thought we would be needing for the next week or so. Packed the whole truck and then put the truck on the ferry and crossed. It's an hour and a half crossing, so it's nothing spectacular or super complicated. The views are super nice though, and again, being in my case the only visitor as far as I'm aware on the ferry, you're gonna get some looks for sure. Of course, it doesn't help that I run around with a camera for you guys, to film everything for these episodes, but like you're gonna get some looks, but it's at no point are you like not welcome. So super nice to do, just adds to the experience in my eyes, because it is going to Jakarta, then to Makassar, then to Baubau, and then a ferry to Muna. Like it is a trek to get to the majority of these caves, but again, that too adds to the adventure, of course. And I did try to insert a bit more of that adventure in the videos. As you guys maybe know, if you're a long-time viewer of the channel, Episodes used to be around 10 minutes long, and I've pretty much doubled that. So I'm working more on 20-minute episodes. Because this is now a full-time thing I do, so I simply have more time to put into it to make that happen. And B, because I'm just shooting a lot more and I'm trying to add a lot more travelogue. So if you're strictly wanting to see the dives, the result is now that the episodes usually have a bit of a prologue of 5 or so minutes where we're actually just getting to the place, or where we're looking at a little bit of local folklore. You may or you may not like that, right? So that's entirely up to what it is you're searching for. But I think if we're going to go to these faraway places to shoot these episodes, it would be almost criminal not to show the local color a little bit, and not to at least try and transport everybody into that environment, and maybe even convey the feeling of what it feels like to be there in the way that I felt anyway. So maybe let me know in the comments below if you guys think that travelogue element should stay, or if I should just put it at the end of the episode for those who still want it. Although it usually makes more structural sense to show how we got there first, obviously. We then got to Muna Island, and in episode 2, you can see that, and you can see Labungkari Cave. So the episodes are slightly out of order in terms of like which caves we dove first, second, third, but I tried to make them as narratively sensible as I could. So we end up in Labungkari, which is a completely different cave than Lanto Cave. In fact, in Labungkari, there's a lot of places where you can just flat out surface. There's a lot of just room to take a breath if you wanted to. But there's other challenges, yeah. The biggest challenge being that it starts with a restriction. So if you're not super cool with that, then maybe that's a deal breaker for that dive. It's not crazy. It's not a maybe if you've seen our Marchepied episode in the French Caves series, you know, that was a serious squeeze. This one was a little roomier, but not a whole lot. So depending on whether you like that or not, you do have a few minutes of squeezing through before you can get to the good stuff. When you then get to the good stuff, there is immediately a collapse. So there's a massive pile of rocks. There is actually, people ask this in the comments, there is a passage where you can sort of sneak around it, but it is super tight. And since I had the big camera on me, the Sony FX3 in the Marelux housing, I was not, like, I just didn't want to risk it. I don't think it would have worked, and I didn't want to find it out the hard way that it didn't work. So essentially what we did was Chacha just took my 2 side mount cylinders, held them in front of him, and then pushed himself through the restriction. I grabbed the camera and just crossed over the collapse. What that adds though is for a little bit of a nice break inside the diving. Sometimes, especially the cave diving episodes, can be a little bit monotonous, or they are definitely a challenge to keep them narratively engaging. If you have wreck dives or other dive sites that have historical artifacts, you have stuff to talk about. You have a history to elaborate upon. Sometimes with cave dives, there's only so many times that I can describe how stalactites are formed and so forth. So it's then nice that you have like an other visual element. It was not super easy because I was on my own to then place the camera somewhere, cross over, go back, pick it up. I think I crossed the pile of rubble like 3 or 4 times just to get the shots, while really it should have been cleared in one go. But that's okay because I think it adds a neat little element. We then, of course, geared back up, did another series of checks, and then continued the dive. And what's very, very nice about this dive, about Labungkari Cave, is that it sort of loops back up on itself, but underneath itself. And I do mention this in the episode, I just don't know how visually clear that is. But you basically end up diving underneath the passage that you just dove. So it's kind of layered. It's not super deep because the passage you're first at is just like 3 meters or so, maybe like 10 feet. So the passage underneath is then maybe like 8 meters, maybe like 30 feet, I don't know, something like that. But it is a weird sensation to like be backtracking upon yourself and then knowing that you have to go back on your backtrack and then back over it. So it's cool because it just shows how crazy layered the planet is, right? And especially because the formations there are very different than they are in Lanto Cave in Baubau. A lot more holes, like literal Swiss cheese, which is fun to play with visually. Getting some shots through those holes and whatnot makes the lighting very interesting. But definitely one of my favorite dives, I think, of that expedition. I do have to also give a shout out there to our porters, Ronnie and Aki. They don't really speak any English and I don't speak any Indonesian, so they're not featured all that much in the episodes. But these guys were with us for the whole duration of the expedition, mainly driving us, but also like preparing the equipment to the point that, you know, the things they could prepare that I don't necessarily want to prepare myself. Which obviously I would still want to, for instance, assemble everything, but they would fill cylinders, etc. And of course, they're also carrying a lot of the equipment to the dive sites. And if you see in Labungkari, for instance, yeah, it is a little bit of a descent into a dry sinkhole just to get there. And then, of course, a climb back up afterwards. And so having these guys to like take care of that for us is amazing. And they did that always with a smile, like they were super funny guys as well. And we had a bit of an audience. So in many cases, people, because it's not, as I said, not a super touristy area. So people would just show up and kind of see what's happening, like see what are these crazy people doing. I imagine, and I don't know this, but I imagine being a foreigner, maybe you sort of get a wild card of like, oh yeah, crazy tourists or whatever. But I can imagine that for someone like Chacha, our local cave diver, that it's maybe considered even more weird because really not that many Indonesians are cave divers per se. So I think for one of their own, so to speak, to like do all of this is maybe even more strange, especially because they usually attribute some supernatural characteristics to many of these places, as we will, by the way, see in episode 5, which airs the day after this podcast. Our third cave is kind of a neat one, and I really liked it. And it's funny because a lot of, like Chacha, for instance, was very blasé about it. He said, "Oh yeah, it's just under our campground. It's right here. Like it's not hard to get to," and it isn't. I mean, it is literally a 1-minute walk from where we sleep. But I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was absolutely spectacular. And again, very different from the other two. So Lapahia is its name. Because we stayed at Cadena, is the name of it's a glamping resort, essentially. So it's sort of a series of tents, but with a little bit of more permanent infrastructure. So like a shower, and even an air conditioning, which was very welcome because it was... At times, it's just 35 degrees Celsius outside. So it's a little bit of a glamping situation, but still nice because you still have that sense of sleeping in a tent, but you have all the amenities, like, for instance, the 20 outlets that I needed to charge all my batteries. And so a 1-minute walk from there was Lapahia Cave, which has the most dramatic entrance of them all, because especially when you dive it in the afternoon, when the sun sort of starts setting a little bit, and so it's at a lower angle, it beams right through the entrance hole, and it creates this Indiana Jones, here's the Holy Grail light beam, which is amazing to see. And again, if we go by our motto, the more spectacular the entrance to the dive site, the better the dive. This already is scoring very high in that regard. What's really nice about Lapahia is that it has a lot of super white limestone. So it's super reflective. If you looked at the first episode, Lanto, actually kind of black, like super dark. Lapahia being super white, that in itself makes a massive contrast between what those caves look like. But on top of that, there are passages that are just crazy decorated, super beautiful. Especially, I think the most remarkable one, the stalactite ceiling that fell down and that you then have to swim over in through this little field of stalactites, is very, very beautiful in my opinion. But indeed, the cave was maybe a little bit unstable. I wouldn't say that we were ever in any like imminent danger of a crazy collapse. But of course, this fairly young porous limestone, so when you're diving on open circuit, and your exhaust bubbles get in there, you're always going to dislodge a little bit of debris. There were questions about why I didn't shoot these episodes on the Sidewinder. And it's a bit of a long explanation, but I'll try to make it as short as I can. I was traveling with the Sidewinder, but I kept having leakage issues with my dry suit, and I couldn't figure it out in the field what the problem was. I replaced the neck seal and everything, but it just kept flooding. And because it kept flooding, I didn't want to then rely on the suit for my buoyancy as I normally would. So I considered it just a little easier to go on open circuit. You could say, well, use the buoyancy of your wing, which you could certainly do. But of course, if you're then slowly putting water in the dry suit throughout the dive, your trim is all off. And specifically on the Sidewinder, having like subpar trim makes it for a really difficult diving experience. Like the Sidewinder is an amazing machine, but you really need to be in proper weighting and proper trim for it to do its thing properly. On top of that, a lot of these caves, as you can see, are like very shallow. Like sometimes just 3-4 feet, sometimes we're right underneath the surface. And that's maybe also not the best use case of a CCR, right? So add to that Chacha was diving on OC anyway. Add to that the already difficult logistics because we had to bring everything. It just made more sense to say, you know what, if since my teammate is on OC, I'll just go on OC. We'll just not deal with the issues with the dry suit. I couldn't figure it out. Yeah, I got a new one eventually, but I couldn't do that there, right? So that is the long explanation of why it's not dived on the CCR, but why it's dived on OC. But again, fairly shallow caves and never super crazy big. There is one episode coming, episode 6 is in Laulawi. That is a several kilometer cave dive with scooters, but it's still doable on open circuit because it is so shallow, and if you have proper gas planning, it's absolutely fine, of course. But I would have loved to do it on the Sidewinder, but that'll be for some other time. The fourth dive in this series and the last episode that's aired so far is Moko Morete. That is the cyan blue sinkhole, and somehow that is the episode that absolutely just shot up 35,000 views, whatever, in the first 5 days. Lots of enthusiasm, lots of comments. I think internally in Indonesia, just really popular because it really does showcase that hidden, lost paradise beauty that a lot of places in Indonesia have. Indonesia has a remarkable biodiversity, remarkable natural environment, and certainly in the less visited areas, such as Southeast Sulawesi, you do still find these places that are they're not, it's, to be honest, and I say this in the episode, it's not so dissimilar from some cenotes in Mexico, for instance, in terms of how, like the blue sinkhole vibe. But the difference is that there is no infrastructure, there are no visitors. So that feeling of raw nature hits you so much harder when you first see it. And that's in no way to detract from any of the Mexican cenotes because they're gorgeous. But there's, of course, a different feeling when you truly feel like you are the only ones, maybe in days, who have been there, versus, a parking lot with maybe 10 other teams, right, who are getting ready to dive. So that in itself is absolutely amazing. And then the cave, I will be honest, I thought Moko Morete cave was maybe my least favorite one of the series. It's still a cool cave, but just the others are just so amazing that this one was maybe a little bit less spectacular. But again, the sinkhole, the entrance makes up for so much of it. What made Moko Morete a little difficult is there's just also quite a bit of flow, like more so than in the others. Like there were points where we really we were swimming against nothing. Like we were swimming just to stay in place, which, that on OC, of course, burns through quite a bit of gas, although that on CCR also is not ideal. So and it's just not as decorated maybe as the others. There's no real discernible features besides the flow that make it really stand out. But the entrance makes for 50% of the dive in that case. Probably never has the dive saga statement been truer than on that one, that the more spectacular the entrance, the more spectacular the dive. And then in that pool, there is that floating organism that I know looks like a piece of algae, but I swear I've looked at that shot like hundreds of times, and it moves with intent, and it looks like it's wiggling its tail to produce movement, and you can even see at some point its mouth seems to be opening and closing. And I know like 50% of people say no, it's just algae floating up, but maybe there's something that's like covered in algae that's floating up. I don't know. You should go and watch the episode if you haven't yet to know what we're talking about. But it is such a mystery to me as to what that thing is. But I swear to God, it is it's living. It lives. I don't know what it is, but if somebody knows, please tell me, because it still keeps me up at night. This series so far, there's been a combination of Sony FX3 and Insta360 Ace Pro 2. As you guys know, the channel is supported heavily by Insta360. And of course, that's how we're able to often make these episodes, because they are not cheap to make, of course. But they're also just really good cameras. And you see that again in this series, especially because now I've started playing with using them interchangeably. And I know, of course, when you look at the FX3 footage, especially on a really big screen, you can certainly pick it out. But most of you probably consume it on a fairly small screen size, or maybe even in a lower resolution than 4K, just because of your bandwidth, your internet. And people are not always able to pick out which is which. And so that's fun to play with this time around. It is, of course, harder to dive with the Sony FX3 with a bigger camera in a bigger housing, with a big 210mm dome, with a video monitor on it, so it's just bulkier. Again, in Labungkari Cave, we couldn't get through one of the restrictions and had to cross over the collapse because of the camera. So it limits you in some ways, but of course, it does produce this nice soft image with shallow depth of field. That, especially if you look in the Lapahia episode, so the cave dive underneath our camp, you can. That's all the underwater shots are shot on the FX3. There are maybe 5 shots that are Insta360, and I think you can see the butter smoothness of that a little bit, but again, it's just it takes a lot more maintenance, right? You need to really pack the camera into the housing, in the AC, in the room, in the tent, because if you pack it outside in the humidity, your entire dome is fogged over. You're like, that's the end of shooting that day. So that means you cannot use the FX3 dry on land, in the car, gearing up, traveling, whatever, unless you have a time to repack it and like dry it all out and dehumidify it before the dive. So it's just it's a little bit more high maintenance, but of course you're never gonna hear me say that the image quality is the same, because it obviously cannot be. It's a larger sensor, more light sensitive, more dynamic range. But the trade-off is that it is a little bit more cumbersome to shoot with. So let me know in the comments as well if you guys see the difference, like if you can pick out which is which, and if you have a preference, if it matters to you, or maybe you're just happy with the visual quality the way it's always been on the channel. We have 3 more episodes coming up in this Caves of Sulawesi series. Tomorrow, if you're listening to this podcast when it comes out, at least, tomorrow we have episode 5, which is kind of cool because we're looking at some really, really ancient cave paintings in conjunction with the Laodepanu cave dive. Super nice cave, wide open spaces, lots of stalactites. Then we have Laulawi, which is the longest cave in Southeast Asia at the time of recording, and was the one that was heavily featured in the Project Butang expedition about 2 years ago, where they did a lot of mapping and exploring in that system. And then our last episode, a cave that's very dear to me because it's my favorite, and it was also our actual last dive of the expedition, Anoa, where that one is so decorated that it still melts my mind when I think about it. And I think I got some really good shots in there. So we will debrief those as well, of course, when they are all out. But for now, we got at least those first 4 episodes out of the way. I hope there was some useful extra information in here that's not in the episodes, but always feel free to comment underneath the episodes or underneath the podcast, ask questions. And lastly, for those of you who are looking to become scuba instructors, I have a little announcement because I am running 2 exclusive instructor development courses this year. It's the only 2 courses that I'll be running this year, and it's in September and October 2026, of course, in the Caribbean. An instructor development course, one from September 1st to 16, one from October 6th to 21st. And you can find those dates on the Dive Saga Instagram page and the Facebook page, of course. But by all means, feel free to send me a message and ask for details. I like to run high-end instructor courses, so we don't just teach to pass, we teach to actually build a career in scuba, which is also the title of my book, and that's not a coincidence. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Dive Saga Dive Debrief podcast, and thank you for all your support and enthusiasm for the Caves of Sulawesi series. I'm excited to hear what everybody thinks of these next 3 episodes. It's a series that I've made with a lot of love and dedication. I enjoyed working on it, and I definitely enjoy seeing everybody else enjoy it. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you next time.